Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Stay in Touch Best Practices, How to Use Rover to Revolutionize the Front Desk. I am your host, Justin DeRisi, the customer marketer here at StayNTouch. This is actually the second in a series of best practice webinars where we go beyond simple product training to cover the best tips and strategies for optimizing your experience with Rover and fully embracing the new way to hotel. This presentation will be approximately 45 minutes long. In the interest of time, I don't think we're going to be able to get to a Q&A session today. However, I will provide my email address at the end of the presentation in case you have any questions. So, moving on to the webinar agenda. This webinar is going to be about the changing role of the front desk agent and how to maximize revenue and guest satisfaction in a new mobile-first environment. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the new role of the front desk agent and sort of compare it to the traditional way to hotel and show you sort of the advantages and the promise of a mobile-first front desk strategy. Then we're going to take a step back and we're going to look at the concept of guest engagement. We're going to look at why guest engagement is important, what guest engagement is and what it isn't, and how a mobile PMS can really help you facilitate guest engagement. Then we're going to look at your lobby. What would a lobby look like if it doesn't have a front desk? What can you do with a mobile enhanced lobby that you couldn't necessarily do with a traditional lobby? And then how does that fit into your broader guest engagement strategy? In the fourth section, we're going to look at best practices for using Rover to enhance upsells and increase guest satisfaction. So this is going to be I guess, a primer on salesmanship. It's going to cover a number of conversational tips to maximize conversions. In a number of different ways you can, capture your guest's imagination during check-in. Finally, we're going to look at different management techniques to incentivize upsells in your front desk staff. This is really a new way of looking at the role of the front desk agent. And you're not going to be able to facilitate that in your property unless you have training programs and unless you properly incentivize this new way to approach things. So we're going to cover that too. So the reimagined role of the front desk. So in the old way to hotel, check-in can be a very tedious and administrative process, right? So, just imagine a guest walking into a hotel. They enter into a largely empty lobby. It's dominated by a giant granite front desk. They wait in line for the front desk agent. Sometimes they wait 15, 20 minutes in line. When the front desk agent eventually gets to them, they go through the check-in process as competently as they can, but their head's buried in a screen, not because they don't want to engage with the guest, but because they're dealing with a very complicated user interface. And they have to click through a bunch of menu options and sort of decipher a number of different acronyms to just get what they want to do. The front desk agent might, at the end of the process, ask the guest if they have any special requests or if they want a room upgrade or any particular amenities, but this is done pretty quickly and it's almost as an aside. The guest invariably will say no because they've been waiting in line and they just want to get on with their trip. The system isn't great, but it works. So the question is, why would you want to change something that works? And the reason is that you want to change because the world is changing around you. This is a pretty common theme in a number of our different presentations. But mobility is empowering the customer in ways that we've never seen before. Customers are now taking an active role in curating their trips and curating their experiences. Consequently, they want more convenience, control, customization, and authentic connections. That's a really key point there, authentic connections. So consequently, supersizing at the front desk just doesn't work if you want to convert for upsells. Guests who are empowered and who want authentic connections aren't going to be swayed by sort of generic, oh, do you want the king size suite? First of all, guests might not be aware of upgrade options to begin with. In any event, it would be difficult to convey the value of an upgrade if you don't have a visual aid, or at the very least a detailed description of what you're asking them to pay for. The conversion conversations are often going to feel rushed. Remember, they're tagged at the end of a long and torturous check-in process. And guests aren't going to be in a buying moment. They're just going to want to get on with their trip. They're not going to want to hang around the lobby any more than they have to. So, you know, with all these faults, why has the industry been slow as a whole to adopt mobility? Typically, we found two main objections. So the first deals with a false dichotomy of high tech versus high touch. People seem to think that if you have sort of a high tech approach to service, that people are just going to be served by robots, essentially. And who wants to be served by the Terminator? The second objection is going to be, you know, what happens to front desk agents? If you don't have a front desk, how can you have, you know, what's going to happen to the role of the front desk agent? Are you just going to eliminate this position? Or is there still going to be a role for them in the hotel? Just a bit of a spoiler, their role actually can be expanded. Okay, so the relationship between high tech and high touch. A high tech mobile PMS actually expands your staff's ability to deliver high touch service. If you can run your PMS from a tablet, then you can meet your guests anywhere in the lobby or anywhere in the hotel and process their requests. It's also great at breaking up long lines. So if, let's say you have some mobile features, but you still have a front desk and there's a line developing, you can send agents with tablets to check people in who are in the back of the line and make it move quicker. If you have a smoother UI with that requires fewer keystrokes to do what you want it to do, that means your staff can actually focus on your guests and less time sort of navigating your PMS. If you can instantly view room status and housekeeping updates and then send instant communications and action items to different staff members throughout the hotel, you can provide VIP service wherever your guests are, and any staff member can really help any guest anywhere. If you have an accountant, for example, that's just, you know, walking down the hall and they see a guest that needs additional toiletries or additional towels, they can go into their tablet and then contact housekeeping and make sure that that request gets fulfilled. Again, if you can visually display room upgrades, you're going to get higher conversions simply because people will be able to see what they're paying for. Put it simply, you can't deliver personalized service if you're literally separated from your guests by a granite front desk. If you're trying to get this authentic connection with your guests, don't throw up a barrier in between you and the guests. So mobility makes check-in feel less like an administrative transaction and more like a warm and welcoming experience. And there's definitely a number of ripple effects for this. So the Hyatt O'Hare actually did a study where they surveyed guest satisfaction before and after they implemented a mobile solution. And they found that guest satisfaction increased by 1/5. Now, if you look at studies by Review Pro, and you find that every 1 point increase in guest satisfaction leads to almost 0.9 increase in ADR and consummate increases in occupancy and RevPAR, this can actually affect your bottom line. Anything you can do to increase guest satisfaction is going to increase the revenues coming into your hotel and also your brand reputation down the line. But the other thing that mobility does is it actually empowers your front desk staff. You can actually expand the role of the front desk position because you're changing it from an administrative role, right, just checking people in, to almost a revenue generating role and a brand ambassadorship role. Tablets can also bring variety to an associate's day just by virtue of it, the fact that it allows them to walk around the hotel. They're not stuck behind a front desk, they can actually move. And again, mobility empowers all employees to take action to enhance the guest experience. So you're not sort of siloed into different functions because everybody can communicate with each other instantly, and because there's a log of that communication, anyone can sort of step up and make sure that the guest needs are fulfilled. The key to all of this is removing the barrier between the guests and the hotel. The sitting behind a desk days are not what these empowered travelers want. Okay, so let's look at guest engagement. We've been talking a lot about sort of authentic connection and engaging with your travelers. And let's sort of unpack that concept a bit. So to engage someone is to hold their intention, specifically to induce them to participate in some way. What you want to do is get your guests to feel such a positive emotion and such a positive connection with your hotel that they do something in the future that benefits your hotel's interests. So whether that's booking another trip with your hotel, whether that's writing a positive review, or whether that's booking, you know, that presidential suite, guest engagement is the name of the game. Guest engagement fuels your in-the-moment conversions. It boosts your guest loyalty, and it boosts positive brand recognition. So let's take a moment and sort of distinguish between guest engagement and guest satisfaction, right? Because remember, you know, the traditional way to hotel, the traditional way to check a guest in technically works. Guests get checked in, you know, and they can be certainly satisfied with the service. But engagement is more than just being satisfied with service. Like, you know, if you promise a guest a certain level of service and then you deliver that promise, that's very good, but you're not going to really engage with them. Fostering guest engagement is about creating an emotional connection that delights your guests. And in order to delight your guests, you really have to go above and beyond. You have to demonstrate empathy, responsiveness, and creativity. So, you know, empathy and responsiveness isn't just simply regurgitating a quote-unquote empathetic script. It's about actively listening to your guests' needs and their preferences, and then proactively serving them to make sure that those needs get fulfilled. You know, I've mentioned this before, it's going to be a theme throughout the presentation. It's really difficult to empathize with your guests and to be responsive if you have your head in a screen. And mobility fixes that. Creativity is about thinking outside the box and going the extra mile. So, you know, example of creativity would be a housekeeper that notices that a child has a bunch of stuffed animals and they arrange the stuffed animals into like a tea party. That's something that, you know, would make the child happy, and that's something, it's a little touch that the parents would remember the next time they want to book a trip. Another example from one of our clients, you know, one of their guests was they were a hotel in LA, and one of their guests was actually a very big Rambo fan. And this was a regular guest, so they felt like doing something nice for them. So they had a signed picture of Rambo along with the guest's favorite bottle of scotch waiting in their room. It's something like this that, you know, this staff really understood what their guests needed. They empathized with that, they were responsive, and they responded to those needs in a creative way that's going to be remembered. Okay, turning your lobby into a space that engages guests. So I think it's important to get a visual of, you know, what a front desk-less lobby is going to look like, how that's going to impact your guests, and sort of the promise that it can really offer. Your lobby shouldn't be a glorified waiting room. You know, we're in the service and hospitality industry. We shouldn't use like the DMV as a as an ideal. If you can build your lobby around coffee shops or wine bars or lounges or co-working spaces, you can create it. You can turn it into a space that's social and welcoming, and more of a community space than just a waiting space. And there's actually some pretty creative ideas of what you can do with a lobby once you get rid of the front desk. So here's a couple of examples of neat lobbies. I'm actually going to do a whole webinar on designing your lobbies, so I'm not going to go too in the weeds in this, but I do want to highlight these examples. So Zoku Amsterdam, that's actually one of our clients. And they teamed up with WeWork to develop a communal co-working space. And this is actually on the top floor of the hotel. So you go up in an elevator 6 floors, and then you're met with this really bright, it's almost like a greenhouse. And then you go into this sort of co-working space. It feels very light and warm. And it's really designed to get people to sort of congregate together, whether it's working or relaxing, and really create that communal atmosphere. Another hotel in the sort of center upper quadrant is Under Canvas, and they actually don't have a lobby because they don't have a hotel. They're a glamping company, and their lobby is actually the great outdoors. And I just think, it's really amazing to, as someone personally, I love hiking and backpacking. And I know that I would be delighted if a front desk agent walked up to me in the middle of Yellowstone National Park and checked me in using a tablet, and took me to my tent. Citizen M turned its lobby into almost like a cozy living room. So instead of having sort of some restaurants and bars, they swapped it for baristas and canteen-style eateries with fresh coffee and grab-and-go food like sushi or salads or things like that. So the idea is you're creating a very homey space where people feel comfortable. And again, people want to lounge around and work or play or do whatever. Blow Up Hall 50/50. This is actually a hotel in Poland, and they turn their lobby into an interactive art exhibit. So what happens is, as you're walking down, they have a camera that's filming you, and it projects you in surveillance style, quote unquote, footage on the wall. So you can actually participate in a giant art project, which is really neat. Now, obviously, every hotel can't be in the middle of Yellowstone Park, or every hotel can't be a modern art exhibit, but you can see the wide range of different concepts that you can play with. And you can see how these lobbies are places where people want to stay, and people can feel good about hanging out in these kinds of lobbies. And if people feel good about where they are, they're going to be more likely to say yes to that upgrade or say yes to that amenity, because after all, the upgrade is only going to make those good feelings continue and increase. Okay, so now the meat of the presentation. Let's look at the best practices of using Rover to enhance your guest experience and to increase upsells. First best practice is super simple, but we actually hear it a lot from our clients that people keep forgetting to charge their tablets. Don't do that. You can't reap the benefits of mobility if your battery's dead, right? It's really important to, in your policies and procedures, have a centralized charging station. Maybe have, rotating iPads. So, one is in use and then one is charging. Really emphasize to your staff that, at the end of their shift, they need to charge the tablet. It's very basic, but nothing can happen if the screen is blank. Best practice number 2 is eye contact. I found this quote in a Skift article. Make enough eye contact with your guests so that they can be sure you're not a flesh-eating zombie. Another way to put this is that your front desk agent should be able to pass the Turing test. If you're worried about high technology causing people to be served by robots, don't turn your front desk agent into a robot. Eye contact is very basic, but it's the foundation of empathy, and it's the foundation of creating that emotional connection with your guest that's going to get you to understand what their preferences are and be more responsive to their needs. Know your guests. Take note of their preferences. Remember, if you look at the stats here, right? People want to spend more money to enhance their trips. 61% of consumers are amenable to upgrades according to Ipsos, 81% of travelers want experience recommendations at hotels. The key is that these upgrades need to be relevant to their needs. And you won't know what their needs are if you miss important emotional and contextual clues, right? So, why is a guest traveling, right? If they're traveling for a wedding, they're going to have a different set of needs and a different set of emotions than if they're traveling for a funeral. If they're on a honeymoon, they're going to want a different type of experience than if they're on a family vacation. If they're about to embark on a new business venture, they're going to have a totally different mood than if they're rushing to a business trip to save a deal that's about to fall through. If the guest is harried or relaxed, that can determine how you should interact with them and potentially what offers you should suggest to them. All of these are important to the types of amenities that you're going to offer. And again, you can't pick up on these if you don't have that face-to-face conversation with the guest. Also, again, so another issue is the issue of OTAs, right? So if you get a guest from an online travel agency, so let's say they book through Expedia or Priceline, you might not know too much about that guest. And the conversation with the front desk agent might be your first opportunity to get actionable information about that traveler. So always check your stay card, right? So this is the picture here is an example of the stay card in Rover. But one of the features of Rover is that you have this centralized stay card where you can, sort of put all of your information about your guests. So not only when they've stayed at your hotel and what rooms they've stayed in, but also their preferences. This screen cap is on the likes tab. There's also a notes tab. So I would definitely incentivize your front desk staff to write custom notes about their guests' needs. If I guess to go with the Rambo example, I'm a big fan of IPAs. If I went to a hotel and a front desk agent knew I liked IPAs, and the next time I went there, there was an IPA waiting in my room, I would be very happy and I'd want to book that hotel again. If you can avoid asking, have you stayed with us before? That's really good. If you have a loyal customer and you ask them, have you stayed with us before? You've just reset your relationship back to zero, and you've given them sort of a little negative experience rather than a positive experience. Conversational tips that lead to conversions. So we've talked about suggesting upgrades based on conversations and the guest profile. So again, look, so mobility plays into this as well, right? So imagine you have a guest that's sort of lounging in your lobby area. Maybe they're drinking coffee or they're having some sushi, and you have your staff sort of walking around just asking how people are doing, asking if they can help. They strike up a conversation about their travel and what brings you to Chicago today? How is your plane flight? This can give you really important information that later you can use to either enhance the trip or offer upgrades. Don't just push the most expensive option, right? Everybody wants to land the presidential suite upgrade, and if you do, that's fantastic. But you want to offer amenities that actually make sense for the guest. You really need to know the selling point of each of the type of rooms that you have in each of your different upgrades. For example, if a family of 4 comes to the front desk and they booked a room with 1 king bed and a pull-out couch, you might want to suggest to them that they should have a room with 2 queen beds and a pull-out couch to avoid their crazy kids, right? This isn't the presidential suite, but it is an upgrade that's specifically tailored to them. Capitalize on early arrivals. If people are hanging around in the hotel for 4 hours because they arrived early, that's the perfect time to offer an upgraded room or offer some amenities to make their stay a little bit more enjoyable. Look for different opportunities to upsell. There's different, changing guest needs, I think, is a big one. Business travelers, for example, might have meetings that pop up at the last minute, or projects to work on, requiring additional, workspace and thus a bigger room. Impulse buys are really key. If you have that family of 4 and they originally booked a standard room, but they arrived at your hotel after being in a 8-hour minivan ride with 4 screaming kids, they might want to upgrade to that junior suite. So the other key aspect is to know your hotel and know your room availability. And this is another feature of Rover that's really important, right? So the this is just the main dashboard screen, right? And at a glance, you can see who's arriving, who's departing, and what, the number of rooms that are occupied, the number of rooms that are vacant, the ones that aren't vacant, the ones that need to be cleaned, or the ones that are out of order. So really, at a glance, you can know the state of your entire hotel, and therefore you can know what rooms you can offer your guests to begin with. And again, this can be done quickly, so you're not buried in a screen going through different menu options trying to find out what rooms are available. You can quickly glance down and then return to the conversation. And again, this is the sort of an actions manager. It's just one way to communicate with your staff. So here you can actually send a custom action item to really any department in your hotel. Again, the idea is that wherever your guest is, you can also be there and you can process their requests instantly. More conversational tips. Don't denigrate the standard option. All of your rooms are great. If someone's booked in a standard room, they're going to have a wonderful, comfortable stay, and they should be happy about that. Only propose the upgrades if you feel that it can directly enhance the guest experience. Creating a sense of urgency. You always want to refer to upgraded rooms as just opening up this evening, or we only have a few of our junior suites left. Creating a sense of urgency is very important. Rate framing, right? So if you have a sale, or if at other times of the year your rates are higher, you should frame your current rates in those terms. These rooms normally run for $200, but for tonight only, we're having a special where they're $169. Refer to your rates incrementally, right? So if your king suite is $200, don't say our king suite is $200. Say for only $35 more, you can enjoy our luxurious king suite that overlooks the view of the ocean. A big key factor here is to demonstrate the value of your upsells. Why should anyone want to pay extra money to stay in a bigger room? A really key feature of Rover is the ability to actually show people pictures of the rooms and pictures of the amenities, so they can actually see what they're getting. So handling an objection. A number of our clients mentioned that they're a bit reticent to show their screens to their guests because they're afraid that the guests are going to see something that they shouldn't, right? And I think this is a little bit misguided. The act of sharing your screen actually builds trust with your guests. So there's this one example, again from Skift, where a hotel in Amsterdam adopted a mobile solution, and a host was using a tablet to check in a group of visitors. And the visitors were curious as to what was going on the screen. I think we've all had that experience. Whenever I go to a restaurant or a bar or whatnot, I'm kind of curious as to what's going on behind the counter. I know it's not going to be anything too groundbreaking, but we always want to know. We always want to explore what we can't see, I guess. They wanted to know what the software knew about them. And this actually gave the chance for the hotel to pull the veil behind some of its secrets and gain trust with the guests. And it also gave them a really great prompt to ask the guests more about their preferences. So the way the host framed it was that, you know, hey, okay, so this is what we know about you, quote unquote. And if we have more information, we can actually use that to make your trip more enjoyable. And the guests really took to this. And it was it was a moment where they gained trust in the brand. And it was just a creative way to both introduce a conversion conversation and also cement future brand loyalty. Management techniques. So there's basically 3 core management techniques that we're focused on. So one is to really focus your team on upselling. Traditionally, the front desk role has been about checking people in and checking people out, and this requires a bit of a philosophical shift. And so you should focus on that shift. Second is providing training on best practices and procedures. Hopefully this webinar will give you some ideas in terms of you know, what to train your staff on, but having policies and procedures in place and then training and retraining on those procedures can go a long way. Finally, you really need to incentivize and measure results. People have to have a reason for to shift in this mindset. So again, the goal is to shift employee mindset from I check people in to really being an ambassador to your brand. You know, your front desk agents really are your most valuable asset, right? They are the face of your organization, and they're the first people that your guests see when they enter their hotel. So you really should give them the tools that they need to really maximize their role and get to engage with their guests as effectively as they can. Onboarding and training. Train your front desk on different guest engagement tactics. You should also empower your staff to negotiate. Give them some wiggle room, right? If they can give a 10% discount, that can lead to greater conversions and greater revenue down the line. A training program could include a number of different things, but some common factors would be upselling processes, procedures, and best practices. In-depth tours of your hotel, its upgrades and amenities. Remember, you really need to know your product inside and out. You really need to know which rooms would be valuable to different segments of customers. Different scripts for reservations, greetings, and upsells. Now, you know, it's not important to, or it's important to not use your script as a crutch, but a script can provide a good baseline to ensure a standard of service, right? Ideally, you'd want people to know the script so well that they internalize it, and then they can sort of improvise within the spirit of the script, let's say. And then dealing with qualifying questions and objections. This is really key. So common questions that people are going to have about your products, and then common objections. Remember, this is moving the front desk agent from a you know, sort of an administrative role to more of a sales role. And so incorporating some salesmanship techniques can be really effective. Develop a recognition and incentive program. You know, if you want people to make fundamental changes to their role, they have to have a reason to do that, right? You know, having rewards, whether it be cash or redeemable points or days off with pay, can go a long way to incentivizing people to really make this mental shift their own. So they're not just going through the motion so that their boss doesn't yell at them, but they see this as really crucial to their own success and their own, you know, payday. One objection I've heard is that, you know, how can you measure individual agent performance when it comes to upsells? You know, maybe maybe a traveler was just, you know, they were planning on upgrading anyway, and the agent just, you know, facilitated that transaction and didn't actually cause that transaction. Well, the way you can deal with that is look at average revenue per confirmed reservation as a baseline. So what you want to do is look at all of your, so take all of your agents and take all of their upsells and measure it over the course of a month or whatever time period that you want. And the agents that consistently are upselling more are probably doing something right, and you should reward them. Post results in a prominent area to encourage a competitive spirit. Obviously be positive about it, employee of the month type deals, taking people out to lunch, any sort of positive recognition that you can show towards people who really go above and beyond and really embody this new way of hotel that you want to implement is a good thing. So looking at Rover, just in terms of different ways you can use Rover to incentivize your staff, in the upsell report, you can actually filter it by day and by user. And then you can export this to Excel and find the averages. But this is a great way to drill down and figure out who are your A players on your staff, who are really getting the conversions. You can also post daily upsell targets, and this will be transmitted to everybody's tablet, right? So anyone who has a tablet will know what the target is for that day and where they are on that target. And so again, this is just another way to motivate your staff. And that is just about the end of the presentation. So if you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, there's a couple of ways you can reach me. First is by email. My email address is jderise@stayintouch.com. That's jderise@stayintouch.com. There's also this form. Let me see if I can copy and paste it and put it in the chat. No, it's not letting me do that. But if you click on that form link, it will, there it is. It will take you to a Google form, and you can ask me a question, and I will be able to answer it. And I am just sending that into the chat box right now. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. Again, we should be having a best practice webinar every month, and I look forward to presenting with you all again. Thanks a lot.